Good evening. Thank you for those who are attending in person and those streaming online. My name is Anthony Arcaro. I am the 6 to 12 Supervisor Special Ed for the district. And tonight we're excited to welcome Ms. Jennifer Harrison, who's volunteering her time to present tonight. Ms. Harrison used to be a writer and editor, and then earned her master's degree in criminal justice from Boston University. She continues to dedicate her life working on raising awareness, policy, and education in her role as coordinator of the ARC of New Jersey's Sexual Violence Prevention Program. Tonight, she'll be leading a valuable presentation that will focus on sexuality and sexual safety for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Some of the topics will include relationships, boundaries, consequences, public versus private, consent, self-advocacy, and other safety measures. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Jennifer Harrison.
I just need to check on the clicker. Right here. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. So, like Anthony said, I'm Jennifer Harrison. I'm with the ARC of New Jersey on a grant. It was 1 year to see what we could do to sort of address the issue of sexual violence in the IDD community. I'm sure you all know that it's just tremendous, and not a lot is being done. So, if anyone has any questions as we go through, just feel free, or I can take questions at the end. So, and if you can't hear me, I'll try to speak up more. Okay. Haha. I'm sure none of you need it, but I like to do a content advisory. Basically, if anyone is uncomfortable with anything, you know, we will be talking a little bit, not in depth, about sexual violence. So if you need to leave the room, I'm going to make the slides available for everyone, so you can always watch it at home. So this is not so much for you. This is for the parents who might be watching this streaming. Can't go to a school without getting assigned a little homework. So it's what I call R&R, which is when you go home, you want to repeat what you've learned to your kids in order to reinforce it. We don't tell our kids, don't cross the street without looking both ways once. We tell them 50, 100, 799 times until we know they get it. So the important points that I will, definitely underscore, you want to continue to double back on it, to always repeat it, and whenever you can find a chance. And then role model. Things like knocking on doors before you enter. It's how we teach public versus private, not changing in front of other people unless you ask, is this okay? I'm going to be getting changed. You're okay seeing this? So all of these things are really, it's important to model them at home. What we'll cover. Just to give you an overview, we'll just talk about what is sexual violence. A few statistics, not a lot. Why this community, and I'm calling it IDD, I don't know what you call it if you refer to it as that here, but it's intellectual and developmental disability, so we just abbreviate. But why this population is so vulnerable to sexual violence. And the importance of education. It is, there are a lot of reasons why they're vulnerable, but I do believe that lack of education is first, second, and third to blame. So all of these issues we'll touch on. This isn't going to be a 3-hour presentation. And then we'll just sum up talking about my program, the Sexual Violence Prevention Project, and CJAP, which is the Criminal Justice Advocacy Program at the ARC of New Jersey. Are you all familiar with the ARC? There are, there's like one in every county. I think Bergen and Essex share one. So those are the local ARCs, and I'm at the ARC of New Jersey, so we're on the state level, and we do things like policy, and we're trying to get a policy through now that will include personal safety education, not sex education, but personal safety, just for the big things like consent, boundaries, public and private, what's appropriate, internet safety, and to get them into transition services so that kids can get it at school. Okay, so I skipped something. Okay, so one of the things I have done in my position is I created this curriculum for home use, and it's a home sexuality education curriculum. I know a lot of parents opt their kids out in New Jersey, whether or not they have IDD, and for things that conflict with their moral and/or religious beliefs, which I understand. So what I did was, when I was creating it, I gave sort of a heads up in the beginning. In section blank, we're going to talk about blank. But also, if they read it over to begin with and they say, I don't want to talk about sexual orientation, I don't want to talk about gender identity, I don't want to talk about other things, ways to approach pregnancy, alternatives to parenting, they can skip over that and just continue, but the important parts can be hammered home. So I put together, it's 10 lessons, and there's an increasing level of things like anatomy and sexuality and violence. The first 3 modules do not mention any of it. It's so we want to ease people in, and then as it goes on, we keep looping back to what we've learned, so we continue to reinforce it. There are also 100 worksheets that go with it, and activities and role plays. I don't get a commission if anyone uses it. It's free. I'm just promoting it because if any of you are curious, it's not up yet, but it's, my goal is January 1st. Right now we have self-advocates and families reading through it to sort of give their final stamp. Yeah. Okay, so what is sexual violence? Well, we all know sort of the most egregious forms, right? First of all, it's a wide range of sexual acts and behaviors that are unwanted, coerced, committed without consent, or forced either by physical means or through threats. We know assault, abuse, rape. These are ones we hear about. Trafficking, yeah, we're like, okay, I've heard a few, instances of this, but like coercion, somebody wearing you down in order to get you to have sex with them. It's actually a form of sexual violence. Threats, harassment, stalking, hidden cameras, it all falls under this, this umbrella. And we do need to alert our children about this just so they know that they can say no to these things. Okay, couple of statistics, nothing too boring. People with IDD are 7 times as likely to experience sexual violence as those without IDD. More than 90% of those people will experience 10 or more experiences. 49% who are victims of sexual violence, 49% will experience 10 or more than 90% of people will experience some in their lifetime. So we often think about people who are victimized, but people with IDD, it's also much greater risk of them perpetrating these crimes too, for a number of reasons that we will get into. It is the second most common crime among people with IDD, and it's the crime for which most offenders with IDD are incarcerated. And as for reporting, so nearly 1/3 of all sexual assaults are reported. But about 3% of sexual assaults against people with IDD are reported. And there are a lot of reasons for that too. One of which is I have been talking at colleges to criminal justice classes, talking about how the criminal justice system needs to adapt and include. They're just now talking about mental health issues, and there's a tremendous amount of overlap between the trauma, communication issues. But the police really need to get out into communities, become familiar with what IDD looks like, and not just that, but become familiar with what it looks like in their citizens, you know, in their towns and cities, so they can recognize when something's not right. You have to understand what's normal to realize what is abnormal behavior. So as we can imagine, the intersectionality of people of color who also have IDD, the statistics go through the roof. And so there are just some statistics. People without disabilities have a 30% likelihood of arrest after police interaction. People with disabilities are 44% likely to be arrested. Now, white people with disabilities, 40% are likely to be arrested after police interaction by age 28, but people of color with disabilities, now you're up to 55%. So it's really that much more important to educate the kids. There's a history of ableism and racism that overlap, phrenology, ugly laws where people who were deemed unsightly were to be kept from view. This includes people of color and people who are disabled. And obviously systems of oppression in communities of color. There's they don't have as good health care, and there are pollution issues, and there's a number of issues that make this almost, I want to call it a comorbidity, that much more dire. Okay, so why are they more vulnerable to sexual violence? Well, first of all, there's the culture of compliance, which is also called learned acquiescence. We teach our kids who have IDD to be good, don't fight, don't talk back, don't cause trouble, just do what they have to do. And there's a lot of poking and prodding, right? A lot of questions, a lot of doctor visits, and they're really not taught to sit as advocates for themselves. And so when, you know, somebody sidles up to victimize them, they don't even know about consent. And if they did know about consent, they don't know how to deliver the consent or non-consent. They rely on others for personal care daily. This is the more obvious things like bathroom and washing and changing, but it's also things like the people who are responsible for feeding them. Now there's some currency that they can use. People are in charge of your money. They're in charge of your transportation. They're sometimes in charge of your communication aids, whether it's hearing aids or your phone. So there is a tremendous power imbalance that is can be used for worse. Isolation, very big one. As we know, abuse thrives on isolation, and people who have IDD are much more subject to isolation. They have special schools, special classrooms, there's stigma, there's, you know, all the things that separate them, and they're socialized to accept being touched by anyone. I love technology. See, this is my way of repeating and reinforcing. I'm just going to go through. Come on. Out. Boop, boop. Okay, it's becoming comical. there's also a lot of turnover with caregivers. So now you've got 5 times the number of people who might be able to perpetrate a crime. As for loneliness, so President Biden just, let me see, it's, I'm sorry, I'm looking at isolation. Well, anyway, there is a program that is to combat loneliness in America, because they have found that it's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's how bad loneliness is for you. People with IDD are overwhelmingly subject to loneliness. And then communication barriers, very simply, whether due to IDD or not. But that is a reason. This is when I usually play a game with the college students, and it's, you know, how to sort of step into the shoes of someone with IDD, and I have them working in teams, but I decided not to do it here because it would be chaos. So, okay, sexual education, just 2 quotes. Often people are only getting the sort of training in response to their unexpected behaviors in the community or to sexual assault. They are referred for this education in response to something rather than proactively. Nothing bothers me more when people say they are in prevention and they talk about the hotlines that you should call. Absolutely important, you need to know them, but let's make hotlines obsolete and unnecessary. Oftentimes, sexual abuse is actually among the only sexual experience they've had. When you don't have other healthy sexual experiences, how do you sort through that? And then the shame and the layers upon layers upon layers. That brings us back to loneliness. There's just not as much social interaction. A lot of parents aren't amenable to dating. Okay, so I'm sorry, but also before we go on to this, lack of education is such a big one. They often want to start sex ed for people with IDD at age 18. That's actually what's going on with the curriculum I wrote. They're talking about 18 to 21. It's too late. Cognitive age varies among people with IDD, but biological age is biological age, and hormones are hormones. And if we don't tell people what to look out for, what they could be feeling, you know, the parts of their bodies, it can lead to frustration, and it often leads to aggression, and even sexual aggression. Okay, so relationships. In the curriculum, I'm sort of outlining what the curriculum does, and since I think all, if not most of you, are educators, I'll just, I guess, move a little faster since you're all professionals at this. But you talk about the different kinds of relationships. I don't know if you've ever done the circles curriculum. Has anyone done that? Where it's like your inner circle, innermost is you, and then the next one, a little bit more out, that's family. And then your friends, and it's, you know, literally about distance, emotional distance, and how your behaviors should adjust and adapt to those distances. So we need to teach our kids about that. You know, is it inappropriate for someone with IDD to run up to a stranger and hug them? You know, they might not mind, the stranger might. And also, the stranger might be someone you don't want your child running up to and interacting with. Appropriate and inappropriate behaviors. This is another big one. Teaching people even, you know, don't friend your teacher on Facebook. Don't kiss your teacher, you know, but it's okay with your grandma, that kind of thing. Expectations within different relationships. Caregivers can feel like friends, right? You spend so much time together, you talk really intimately, and, you know, who knows what's going on, but, you know, they're actually paid to be with you. So you don't show up at their house, and you don't, expect them to come to your birthday party, and just explaining all those boundaries. Creating and maintaining relationships. We actually have a section on that where it's, how to get to know someone. And then we literally have a schedule on a worksheet where you can say, I'm going to call my friend blank Thursday, every other Thursday during the winter. Something like that, because schedules are very effective with people with IDD. Again, loneliness, we're doubling back there, and that's when I was looking for my little note, which is the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, is doing the National Strategy to Advance Social Connection. That is what I was talking about before. Of young adults with IDD, 85% say that they're lonely. So that can definitely lead to inappropriate, if not criminal, sexual behavior. And then there are the myths. People with IDD are asexual. Not true. People with IDD are hypersexual. Not true. Some people may be, but it varies just like among the population of people who do not have IDD. They think cognitive age is the marker. Well, she's on the level of an 8-year-old, so she shouldn't learn about sex. She should, because she has the hormones of a 21-year-old. They think people with IDD lack the ability to make choices and determine what is best for their lives. Now, I understand this. It's hard to trust any kid right off the bat to be able to make good choices. But with guidance and support from trusted adults, it is perfectly reasonable to believe that someone will be able to make choices about what they do with their lives, including building a family and a home. Okay, boundaries. This is one of the big ones that parents should go home and repeat, repeat, repeat. These can be physical boundaries. My daughter, who's neurotypical, but she does have anxiety, does not like to be grabbed on the wrist. She doesn't like people to take her by the wrist. And she will tell them, she's in theater school, and she will say, in this exercise, just don't touch my wrist. And that's a way to set boundaries. You can tell someone that, and you can feel free to ask, is it okay if I give you a hug? Am I sitting too close to you? Things like that. We really need to start teaching people with IDD that they have a voice and they have the right to be comfortable and feel safe and make themselves safe for others. Expressing your boundaries, it's hard. We have a lot of role plays where it's like, sitting back to back and telling each other your boundaries in different creative ways. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And then there are different boundaries. There's also emotional boundaries. If you come crying to someone every day, you get this secondhand trauma. You can say, I'm really not in a headspace to, right now. Time, if you drag someone with IDD along on a, business trip that takes 7 hours to get there, it's, that can encroach on their boundary, and intellectual and physical. Here's another big one, public and private. And it's not just public and private places, although they do need to know that. There's also semi-private, and we don't talk about that enough. But things like your living room. When you're alone in it, it feels like a private room. But someone could walk right in and it's no longer private. Same with your backyard, right? If there's a short fence around it, if someone can see in or walk in, it is not a private place. But for the private places, we have to respect that it is private and knock before we enter, ask for permission before you enter, you know, don't look through someone's stuff. It's just, and also telling the other person, I prefer that you not go through my journal or whatever it is. But setting your boundaries and respecting others, that's another way of respecting public and private. We all know public and private body parts. The easiest way to say this is it's the parts your bathing suit covers. And then there's public and private behavior. And that's where knowledge of public and private places really comes into play, because the behavior is going to depend on the space, whether or not it's appropriate. So really reinforcing that your room, when the door is closed and the windows are closed, that is your space, absolutely. The bus, if no one else is on it, not a private place. The classroom before the teacher enters and the other students, not a private place. And then there's just family and home culture. You know, you want to adapt to this idea. One of our worksheets is signs for the door. And there are 3 different ones. They're different colors. They say different things. Please knock before entering, or please do not enter. And it's, you know, everyone in the family can put one on their door, because everyone in the family should be reinforcing this. Okay, human anatomy and development. This is the part that everybody dreads. And full disclosure, I don't like it. I don't even, you know, I do these PowerPoints and I'm like purple. But just like changing diapers, no one actually wants to do it, but you do it because it needs to be done. And the more you do it, the less it can bother you. So we're all learning together. When you teach body parts, that's when you want to underscore what's public and what's private. And some things are semi-private, like if you wear a cropped shirt, that's appropriate in some places, but not at, you know, a place of worship or school. You know, even though your midsection isn't really a private part, it's like a semi-private part. Puberty is very important to talk about, because we all go through it, and we all notice that we're going through it, and it's rarely fun, and it's rarely pretty, and it's rarely easy. So telling your child what to expect, that it's normal, you know, menstruation. There's so many instances of people not anticipating that this was going to happen, and all of a sudden they think they're dying. It's really important to let people know what's coming. It's one of the reasons why I put what we'll be covering at the beginning of this. You want people to know, you know, this is where we're going to walk and nowhere else. Sexual feelings is another big one, because, you know, if you don't know what it is, it's hard to understand. So again, it has and does lead to aggression, sometimes physical aggression, because they don't understand what's going on or how to deal with it, right? Physically and emotionally. People with IDD are as likely to be part of the LGBTQ plus community. There is no difference there. So acknowledging sexual orientation and gender, and in writing the curriculum, I was like, ooh, this is tough, you know, not just writing like male body parts. Suddenly I was like, oh, I can't really say that, can I? So we'll just use the right words. And gender, just being respectful and acknowledging it, because again, people with IDD have the same feelings. They may not have the same knowledge because people haven't, you know, perhaps taught them, but if they're feeling these things, it's important to recognize it and address it. Sex, teaching the facts, you know, what it is, what it's like, consequences. That includes pregnancy, STIs, and emotional consequences, to be very honest. They need to know these things because the next one, this is decision-making and communication is our third module for the home curriculum. And what we're teaching them is to make decisions, not just about sex, but to make decisions in life. You want to look at your personal values, you want to think about your boundaries, and you want to think about the consequences. And if you can weigh all these things, you're in a good position to make a solid decision. So it's important that they understand what consequences are cause and effect, what consequences are sexually, and then they can be better informed and be able to make their decisions. Grooming and hygiene. Important to address, especially because hygiene is what keeps you healthy. Grooming is just what keeps you, nice to be around, I guess. So teaching that, actually, on the next page, I show one of our worksheets. This is the sample, and then there's one that's not filled in. But I shaded this in as sort of a sample of how you might fill in one of these schedules. So brush your teeth. You're going to have it twice that you can check off, AM and PM every day. Wash hands every day. Wash your face. Bathe. Washing your hair. Probably not an everyday thing. Some people like to. Some people are once a week. So just as an example, I shaded 2. And then things like cutting your nails. That can be done weekly, but using deodorant, let's underscore that. I also have a worksheet where they can fill in their favorite products or products that they want to try and make it fun. Let's go get shampoo that smells really good or a bottle that you really like, and to, give people more of a say in what's going on. If everyone walks out of here with nothing else, they need to know consent. This is something that I talk about when I talk at colleges. I will literally stop and explain consent to these adults, basically, because people don't always realize what is consent. We talk about an enthusiastic yes. That's how it's most often referred to. That means you're happy about it, you're expressing it very clearly, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. It's independent, so it's not coerced. It's not someone asking you to do them a favor, making you feel guilty, or saying, you owe them. And it's not silence. It's not a shrug. It's not an I guess. And it's not silence. That doesn't equal a yes. Only a yes is a yes. So I say this over and over again because people don't always know that. If someone is silent and going along with it and their body language is saying no, even if it's subtle, it's a no. And we have to teach not only our gen ed kids this, but also the kids who are in specialized classes, because not understanding consent is the greatest way that sexual violence occurs. Now, how to ask. Ask. Just ask. Sometimes you'll get it without asking, but if you don't get it, then ask. When to ask? That's something nuanced that, I guess parents can talk to their kids about in their own way. I mean, it's really up to an individual, but I personally wouldn't be sitting at coffee saying, hey, later, And then accepting non-consent and rejection, really. There's a worksheet all about how to accept rejection, and on there is, don't take it personally. It's not always about you. When you say no to something, it's not that there's something wrong with that something. And people need to know that about themselves too. You don't ask again 5 minutes from then. You don't call them 2 days later and ask again. You don't get angry. Stay polite. I understand, got it, fair enough. still friends, that's great. And then move on, go find someone else you're interested in. It's not the end of the world. But we have to normalize this for kids. Self-advocacy. The ARC of New Jersey has a self-advocacy program that is incredible. So if you ever want to recommend, something to your students, it's really amazing. The motto, and not just of this advocacy group, but I don't know if you've ever heard this, they say nothing about us without us. And that makes me so happy because it's, people with IDD should have a voice in everything that we do to try to affect their lives. So the New Jersey Self-Advocacy Project, I'm just going to read here or else I'll mess it up. It challenges individuals with IDD to become involved in events, legislative policies, and issues that affect their lives or lives of others with disabilities. There are trainings, seminars, webinars, public outreach. They learn about civil rights, including the right to vote and how to vote. Public outreach, educating state legislators about issues regarding people with IDD, civil rights, self-confidence. There's a tremendous amount of self-confidence that grows when they're speaking in public. Problem solving, and they say this confidence, this voice will translate to matters of personal safety too. Because the more confident you are, the more likely you are to set boundaries for yourself, to say no, and to really respect how you feel. Internet safety. It's so funny, when I sat down to write the curriculum, I was like, oh, the sexual violence section is going to be forever. But it was internet safety that just went on, and the pages were just racking up because there's so much to know. And I really think it's the thing we think about the least. I am totally at fault when it comes to this too. My kids, I was like, don't do X, Y, Z. And the trust was there. As far as I know, all is well, but knowing what I know now, it would have been a bigger talk. Netiquette. Basically, how to behave when you're online. So there's the acronym THINK. Before you post something, you ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? I don't know that it needs to be inspiring, but they needed an I. Is it necessary, and is it kind? And if you could say no to any one of these things, don't post. And also, we tell them, if you wouldn't want your grandfather to see it, don't put it up there. Because once it's there, you can't get it back. Cyberbullying is really about intent. If you post a picture of a friend looking goofy and it's a big laugh, and they call you and say, why would you do that? Well, I don't like that it's up. Fair enough, no problem, I'll take it down. It's not cyberbullying, it's an innocent mistake. But things like group chats to victimize someone, sending around inappropriate photos, rumors, things like that. We all know what cyberbullying is. It looks a whole lot like regular bullying. It's just you can reach into people's homes and do it. Cyber predators. These are often called groomers. People who will try to take advantage of people to get money, for sexual favors, to use sexual favors to get money. They often are very, very nice, very, very complimentary. They may give gifts, but something to tell people to look out for is if they're asking you to keep a secret and not just, I stole a pen 6 years ago. But if they're saying, don't tell anyone about this conversation, immediately go tell someone. Nothing good ever had to be kept a secret, except a surprise party. So We definitely underscore that, and it's really good to talk to kids about, because you don't know who people are online. They can show a picture, it means nothing. So to sort of raise awareness that, you know, we're dealing with a whole new group of strangers when you're online is very important. Sex trafficking, people with IDD are overwhelmingly vulnerable to sex trafficking. Because also we don't always teach people about when to meet someone in person who they've met online. If you make a great friend and you've been talking for a long time and sharing secrets and they've been there for you, and then they want to meet in person, there are a few caveats. First of all, do not tell them where you live. They're not going to pick you up. You'll meet them there. Don't tell them where you live anyway. That comes under privacy. Meet them in public. And as a bonus, maybe bring someone you know. They can either come join you or they can sit across the room at another table. But you have a pair of eyes on you. Obviously, you don't get in anyone else's car. And never turn over a credit card, bank information, passport, none of that. Again, that comes under privacy and security. You want passwords to be kept private, so doesn't matter if it's your best friend in the world who you met online. You do not tell them your password. Make social media private so that people can't find you. Don't tell people your last name online. And, you know, I did see a lot of recommendations that, you know, you shouldn't sort of divert people to your social media if you met them, say, in a chat room, because they can figure out who you are. That to me is a little sleuthy, but, you know, it's all a matter of taste, I guess. But keeping things private, one more thing I want to say about groomers is they will, we need to give people a heads up about being asked for pictures or videos. That's where we circle back to public and private, and that is to stay very, very private. Finally, rights and reporting. The ADA says that people with IDD have the right to safety, privacy, equality, and home and family. People with IDD can get married, they can have children, they can raise those children. It is their right. Now, does that mean that no one needs guidance? Absolutely not. Some people, no matter who you are or what your abilities are, need a support system. They need a group around them, but they do have a legal right to do it. As far as reporting goes, it's tough. I mean, why report? Emotional healing. It stops the offender from offending again, hopefully. And how to report. I go pretty in depth with that, and there's something called a SART team, a sexual assault, I always mess this up, sexual assault, I'll look it up, resource team, I think, and it's basically one law enforcement professional, a social worker, and a nurse. So you can request that if you go to the police to report, or even medical center, and they have to give you someone. Everyone should know, here I put my little, this is my favorite thing. That means take a picture with your phone because that number is to be memorized, or at least saved in your phone. It's the National Sex Assault Hotline that RAIN has, but I've got a huge list of different hotlines. Again, hopefully won't ever need them. Creating a safe space at home means, protecting people's boundaries, respecting privacy, and making sure you have an idea of who's coming in and out of your home. Again, if there are a lot of kids with IDD, have a team. And the more people in the team, the, you know, odds go up. It's just, you know, statistics. So create a safe space. Also, you know, a safe place for your child to come to you and talk about questions, concerns, just what they're feeling. Stay in touch. Get to know your kid as well as possible. And then there's a sexual safety plan. I don't know that you need to necessarily, I don't know, I could see it going both ways. It's recommended, a sexual safety plan, so important phone numbers, maybe a bag that's packed, having your social security card and your bank card, having everything together in case you need to leave the home, having a trusted adult who you can go to, even whose home you can go to if you need to stay for a little while. I could see this being a little anxiety provoking, but again, it depends on the person. Yep. I love this. Okay, so finally, my program is the Sexual Violence Prevention Project. We are working on policy, I say we, I'm a one-man show. I'm an island in that office, so, but I'll use the royal we, I guess. Awareness and education. We're going to be rolling out a series of PSAs for social media, so hopefully those will catch on. Yes, and we have the home sex ed curriculum. I'm adapting that into a safety curriculum that does not mention anything regarding sex, anatomy, violence, anything like that. Peer-led school programs, collabs with educators and IDD supportive businesses. I've been lecturing at universities. Hopefully that'll continue into next semester. And there will be an epic webpage coming as soon as our curriculum is done. We'll be putting that up there, all of the worksheets, resources, blogs, important numbers to know, things like that. And then CJAP is the Criminal Justice Advocacy Program. I'm in awe of this program. They are amazing. What do they call themselves? They're like a clearinghouse for all things criminal related, you know, for the client with IDD. So they give information, they act as liaisons, they monitor quality of care, and they recommend alternatives to incarceration, which is the most important thing. So if someone has offended, obviously they're going to become justice involved. But does that mean incarceration? It shouldn't. And they are incredible at what they do. They also help with applications for guardianship, citizenship, for a public defender. And together we just created a public defense kit with a magnet with the acronym AWARE. And now I regret mentioning that it's an acronym because I'm going to forget some of what it stands for, but it's like, make accommodations for your client with IDD. You know, think about your word choice is the W. Keep it simple. Don't use legal jargon. You want short sentences. Empathize, things like that. So we're going to be sending that out to all the public defenders in the state and maybe all the criminal defenders too. And hopefully they will start making adjustments because, as we know, it's not easy. It's not easy to recognize IDD often. So we help them with that too. Boop-a-doop. So this is my contact information. I recognize I was not eloquent tonight, working on a little bit of sleep. But if you do have any questions, you can always reach out. You can write, you can call, and I'll always answer. And that is a link to our website. And then there's just, if my references, I can, you know, make them available. Does anybody have any questions? That was a lot of talking. I'm sorry, for what?
When you were talking about Connecticut and you said the think theory. So
Yes, absolutely. Is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind? Yeah. It's good. It's like a nice little guideline Thank you.
It was fantastic. I'm the Arts and Health and PE supervisor. I would love to share some of this with my staff members. That there is this PowerPoint available.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to actually share it with all my teachers that are teaching health.
That's great. I'll get that to
Sure.
Or you
Anthony.
get it to Mr. Arcaro. That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you so much.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
I have a question. Are you aware of any like resources for
IDD students that have behaviors that could be thought of as scary or predatory because they don't really understand what's going on in their bodies and how to, it's almost like we can work with them in a way where we're repeating and reinforcing all of these rules, and they might understand it intellectually, but then what happens is they get aroused or something happens in their body and they're out in the community and they don't know how to manage, and then they do something. So I don't know if there's any like specialists or somebody that works like with biofeedback or a body awareness.
That's interesting. You know, what I would say, it's a combination of education. Things like coping skills, whether it's meditation, it's running, if, you know, they're able to run. But also if you're going to look for a social worker or a therapist, to get someone who's trained in working with people with IDD.
Right, yeah.
You're like shaking your head.
Well, yeah, no, just because I think working on a case manager at the high school, and I've had different instances where males, you know, they're interested in different fabrics and they're asking people to touch, and then even someone's giving them consent because the kid is nervous, they don't know what to do, and the general ed students in the school are great with these kids, but it gets scary, and so we can tell these students over and over again, no, like all the, you know, for all that education, but then it's like a blurred line. How do we, like, not who's responsible, but how do you appropriately address what to do when they become sexually aroused? Like, I think that that's not with anything else, but just specifically for some of these kids, to really understand what's happening in their body, not up here,
Right.
but while it's happening, and how to, you know, how to
It's tough.
readjust, yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear you.
And I was thinking maybe there's like an ABA with special, or some, I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll happily look that up for you and see what I can find.
Okay.
I would say, you know, again, it's why it's so important that families from the time they're little, you know, teach things like appropriate and inappropriate, you know, it's, and calming techniques. But also, I mean, you know, what comes to mind immediately, I'm like, we'll make a fabric board that's in your, you know, office, and they can do that, but obviously that's not everyone's
Right,
issue.
and also if it's not like if it's the then are we, you know, like contriving that response, and then what do we do with it? And then I think even I've had parents talk with me about it, and it's hard for them too, because they want to, you know, say the appropriate language and the appropriate things, you know, that's privacy, you do that in the bathroom, whatever it is, but they're helpless too. So sometimes I go down a rabbit hole of looking up, are there any specialists or anybody that can really, because it's like a very specific, you'd have to be trained in how to help them notice what's happening in their body, and then making that connection that they have to kind of turn it off in that moment. And,
Right, yeah.
but I don't want these kids to get into trouble, you know, and that's what's.
Absolutely. I mean, and, you know, I always say, it's like everyone's a victim when
Yes.
someone with
Yeah.
IDD has, you know, aggressed.
Well, I think what's important for us too, you know, for our students, the adults that are with all our students, you know, we play that important piece, as you're saying, you know, because our children are who's learning, and we're there to help. So I think that's why we think of reaching out also on our end as the adults within many of our programs for our students. We need that understanding too.
Yeah.
So, you know, if there's any information, and as you said, any not only PowerPoints, but some type of courses or therapists that, you know, we can work with, because we need that
Yeah.
soup for our students, for all students.
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
I'll definitely, take tomorrow morning and look at what I
We
can
appreciate
find.
that.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm sure, at least the people I work with, they're such pros. They probably know all these things, but I'll go poke around. But what you all do for a living is so incredible. I mean, it's one thing to sit in an office and write about it, but to actually touch lives and deal with behaviors and questions and uncertainties is really amazing. And so, to all of you. But I will definitely get back to you on that, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for letting me lose my words 100 times up there. It's an age thing, I will say. But I'll make the slides available. And thank you for coming and listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, before you go, we always call this during the Christmas party.